The very notion of what a sports car is has went through quite a few shifts in its 100 plus year life. At various points, maximum horsepower and speed in a straight line has been the preferred formula. At others, handling and speed around a track has been the goal. Since the very beginning, sports cars have kind of had an inherent sex appeal. This idea of speed and the willingness to risk everything to push the boundaries of motoring, we applaud people who do these things. So what happens when one of the largest automotive manufacturers in the world turns all of those preconceived notions on their head with one single car? What happens when that company gives said sports car a name that is the equivalent of the word elf or fairy, and makes the headlights and grille tucked together in such a manner that the car now has an unmistakable goofy smile? And what happens when the car itself looks like a frog? And despite all of this, it manages to go down as one of the greatest sports cars of all time. That is the story we're looking at today. After World War II, Great Britain was in complete shambles, and one of the simplest paths towards building the economy was to make and export cars. We know from automotive history, though, it's tough to make compelling vehicles when you have no money. So their success really came out of having a different outlook on what cars, and specifically sports cars, could be. They learned to build cars from existing parts and make some of the best sports cars in the world that really were more than the sum of their parts. They had this ability to take various pieces from other pretty mundane regular cars and turn them into these sporting packages that were very compelling. By the 50s, Austin was kind of like the Ford of England, with their famous Model 7 dominating the budget car market prior to World War II. It was kind of like the Model A of England. This was a meager little car that came in loads of different trims, but it wasn't exactly the ideal platform for a sports car. But it was lightweight, and modified versions of the car would find success in racing. Now, a true performance version of this car came out in 1928, known as the Ulster. This high-compression version of the little 750cc side valve inline-4 made 24 horsepower, which might not sound like much, and it really wasn't, but when your car weighs less than 1,000 pounds, you don't need a lot of power. This car did well in racing and speed records, and it really built the foundation for the car we're looking at today, despite the war pausing all of Austin's sporting aspirations. Now, immediately after the war, Austin got back to making production cars, and they made quite a few rather antiquated vehicles that were pretty successful. But the real beginning to what would be their incredible evolution post-war came in the form of the A30. And most significant for this car was the overhead valve inline-4 engine that powered it. The car wasn't really an outright sports car at all, but this free-revving little simple but beautiful engine would create the foundation for so many legendary sports cars, including the one we're looking at today. Now, Austin wasn't doing so hot as the 50s got underway, making some meager attempts at sports cars, but nothing was really hitting the market well. But everything changed when former racer and founder of Healey Motor Company, Donald Healey, released a car called the 100. This great sports car would mark a turn for Austin when they partnered with Donald on the production of his new sports car and created the new Austin Healey Company. At this point, Austin had merged with rival British manufacturer Morris to form the British Motor Company, or BMC. At this point, the fourth largest automotive manufacturer in the world. And with that support, Healey would evolve their sports car platform, and also MG, which was equally also under BMC, had been known prior to the war for having the best, most affordable little sports cars in the world, with cars like the M-Type or the Midget. But their lineup was also dated, and so the MGA was born, not necessarily a direct competitor with Healey's big roadster, but sort of a middle ground between their older, smaller offerings and the more expensive roadsters in Great Britain. The MGA was lightweight, it was powered by their 1500cc B-Series inline-4, which too was an evolution of that smaller A-Series engine. And it was sleek and streamlined, and it really was a great sports car. It competed directly with Triumph's offering as really an everyman sports car. But an idea was forming among among the engineers at BMC. What if they could take this a step further and make a truly affordable little roadster that was both modern, like those other new cars, but that had the benefits of cars like that older pre-war midget that was so lightweight but handled so well? Quite a few potential cars came out of Austin and MG at this time to fill this niche, including the odd little prototype called the Red Devil. But finally, the task was given to Donald Healey himself to design an all-new entry-level sports car. Healey really was the man for the job, having taken multiple trips to the United States in preparation for designing the Big Healey. He agreed that a true entry-level sports car could be a massive hit, because here in the States, young, new sports car enthusiasts were usually forced to drive their mom's old saloon car and do whatever they could to make it fast. And it was these kinds of motorists that this new car would be geared towards. So Donald and his son Jeffrey went to work, with Jeffrey heading up the design phase with the likes of Jerry Coker and Barry Bibley. These are all names that you'll know if you know anything about the design of the Healey 100, which I have a full video on that series of cars if you're interested. British sports cars at this time had really always been parts bin specials, but now that Austin and Morris had merged, being a parts bin car wasn't so bad. They had quite a lineup to draw from to build this new car, but the standout feature of this new car really would be its chassis. It would have been simple enough at this time for BMC to have simply built a baby Healey, basically a smaller body-on-frame, traditional British sports car, but in order to extract every ounce of performance out of the car's small engine, they needed to make it more advanced. They needed a lightweight chassis, so they decided to go with a steel monocoque frame, much like the contemporary Jaguar D-Type. This would make it the first mass-produced sports car to feature a monocoque chassis. Of course, the most famous British example of this would be the later MGB, but this really was the first. And the result was a lightweight but sturdy, rigid frame. Simplicity was key, and for the design, Healey kept to this mission by eliminating a rear trunk, or boot lid as it's said in England. Now, it's not that the Sprite didn't have a boot, you just couldn't access it from behind the car. Rather, you had to just shove whatever stuff you wanted to bring with you into the boot from inside the car. And this would give the car a really uninterrupted flow in terms of the design. The rear of the car is like the Big Healey at the time, but it's even more simplified. The car's lines are so simple and beautiful. From the side, it kind of has an elongated oval shape that really is unique, but is just unapologetically simple. At the front, a cute mouth-shaped grille was added, alongside what was supposed to be very modern pop-up headlights. Those headlights were nixed by BMC for cost-cutting reasons, alongside other revisions. Some of these revisions actually helped the overall design, like concealing the door and bonnet hinges, but the fixed nacelle headlight, well, that change came to the horror of the original designers, and now the car looked entirely like a frog. I'm not sure that Healey ever intended the Sprite to be cute per se. The goal was to build a mini roadster, but a true roadster in every sense. But this one revision by BMC really did make the thing cute. For the engine, the natural starting point was the contemporary A-Series engine, which first showed up in that A30 car we talked about, but it was now available in 948cc form. There were larger options, but wisely, Healey decided that this engine was the best fit for this car. And though later on the Sprite and Midget would feature higher revving, larger, more powerful engines, those updates came with updates to the suspension and to the brakes to really match the car. At this point, this really was the perfect little engine for a perfect little chassis. Now, 948 cc's doesn't sound like much at first, and it's really important to understanding not only the Sprite, but most British cars at this time. This engine wasn't really unique either. The A-Series engine would find itself in various forms in lots of different BMC products, from vans and boats to tractors and race cars. The real benefit as a sports car platform is its versatility. It's the kind of engine that really could be made and tuned to be anything. But in this case, it was about eking out every bit of performance as possible from the little inline four. The little Austin A30 that was mentioned before was the first place to feature this engine, but in racing the A35 version, it was really found that this engine could be quite sporty, making some 34 horsepower and 50 foot-pounds of torque. And in a stroke of genius, for the Sprite they decided to pair 2 instead of 1 SU carbs to the little engine, giving it a claimed 43 horsepower, paired to the lightweight frame, rack and pinion steering. The Sprite package was perfect, and it really was a success, and it performed incredibly well in testing. Now at this point in America, in the late 50s, general wealth and also the cars themselves were getting bigger and bigger. We actually had the opposite problem as those in England. We were sort of forgetting what motoring was all about, and as our engines grew, our cars grew with them. So many sporting enthusiasts in America decided to look abroad for their sports car fix, and if you at all had a budget at this time, you went to Great Britain and the offerings from the likes of MG and Triumph. But Healey and Austin correctly predicted the interest in an entry-level sports car here in the States. As predicted, the Sprite really was a runaway success, not only generating really solid sales through its 3-year run, but also leading into the Sprite Midget or Spridget, which would sell even better through the 60s and 70s. Shortly after the Frogeye Sprite's release, BMC began prepping the little Sprite for racing and rallying. In 1959, the Sprite would sweep the podium in the 1000cc class at the 12-hour Sebring Grand Prix, leading to factory Sebring kitted Sprites being available for customers. The Sprite and then the Sprite Mark II would dominate regional racing, and even today, it really is the car of choice for those wishing to get into vintage and classic racing. If you've never seen a Sprite or a Midget, it's hard to really understand just how small these cars were. If this tells you anything, they were made to fit in your average British garage, which was and is about the size of a bathroom. Pictures of Sprites next to modern vehicles of all kinds, but especially trucks and SUVs, is pretty laughable. Here's a picture of my own Mark I Midget next to our van. And it's all good and fun until you get in an accident in one of these, and instead of running into you, that giant SUV literally runs over you. Now, having owned a Mark I Midget, I can tell you that there's nothing quite like driving one of these vehicles, which a Mark I Midget is pretty much the same car as a Mark I Sprite. The steering and the handling on my car was so direct, even though it was a project car that I never really got to push to the limits. Just driving around our neighborhood and getting it up to, 30 plus miles per hour, it's just another kind of experience. It's not just that these cars lack all of the modern features that we've become used to, it's the fact that you're basically sitting on the ground, maneuvering around a car that weighs about half as much as the lightest modern car you can buy today. The Frogeye Sprite, with its unassuming look and goat cart-esque driving experience, taught the world that sports cars don't have to be exotic. They don't have to be made of one-off special parts or rare materials, and they don't have to be expensive. This is, of course, the same idea behind the Gen 1 Miata when it came out. Motoring at its best isn't about going double the speed limit, and you can have just as much fun from 0 to 50 as from 50 to 100 or from 100 to 150. I know it's a tired old phrase, but man, it applies more to this car than probably any other car in automotive history. It's more fun to drive a slow car fast than a fast car slow, which is really what you're forced to do when you drive a performance car today on the street. Heck, it might even be more fun to drive this kind of slow car fast than to drive a fast car fast. Now, I have to mention this amazing book, Austin Healey Sprite, The Complete Story by Malcolm Thorne. If you guys want to learn more about this story, I've linked his book in the description below. It's really well written and it's really easy to read, which I personally really appreciate. Alright guys, thanks for watching. If you want to learn more about the Sprite going forward and also the Midget, check out this video at the top, or just check out my channel for more videos on automotive history. Alright, we'll see you guys in the next one. Drive safe.